guys. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 6, An Honorable Death. You're going to meet Johnathan, that's Irina's brother, and see how he gets himself in a little bit of trouble. And there will be a surprise at the end as well, so stick with me. On a dreary autumn morning, 3 black Mercedes limousines sped along the periphery of the city. Back in Warsaw, after a meeting of officers in Berlin, Rolf noticed the morning sky was overcast, a light gray mingled with hesitating sunbeams. Inside the soundproof vehicle, only men's voices were heard, the chatter of victorious warriors. At long last, the ill-conceived Versailles Treaty was history. The Luftwaffe was obviously the best air force in the world. So good, in fact, that even England had put up her tail between her legs. Rolf wished he could shut his ears as easily as his mouth. Those 46 million Brits, through brute force, may still control a quarter of all inhabitable space on Earth, but at least now our 86 million Germans are no longer earning their daily bread from 600,000 square kilometers, Hitler said ecstatically. Excuse me. His Austrian pronunciation reminded Rolf how astounding it was that a non-German with no college degree was voted in by the people to rule the fatherland. Destined by God's wishes? As Rolf's eyes dropped to Hitler's Iron Cross, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was straight out of Triumph of Will, Hitler's grand propaganda film playing in theaters for years all around Germany. Everyone had seen it. He wondered how long the cult of Hitler would survive. The driver rolled down the security window. The restaurant is no more than 20 minutes, including the slow 10 minutes along the parade route. Rolf watched Hitler nod absently to the driver. It was 10 past 10. Good, I see a few reporters snapping photographs. Thank God for these pricks. Imagine how history might remember us without pictures, Heydrick said, smiling out toward the camera. The reporters had turned out for the victory parade in astonishing numbers. Microphones outstretched, cameras propped on shoulders. They had come from all over the world for a chance to interview his boss, the god of havoc. The convoy slowed to a snail's pace. The filled craters in the pavement not compacted enough to keep the champagne from splashing. Rolf chuckled to himself as Heydrick cussed Poland for soiling his uniform. Since Rolf's seat faced the rear, he saw a stream of steel behind the Nazi motorcade, enormous tanks, spit-shined jeeps, and other army vehicles with guns pointed in every direction as protection for the limousine escorting Adolf Hitler, Reinhard Heydrich, and Rolf Brandt to the parade route inside the city. Anyone else may have been delighted to ride with the German High Command around Warsaw, but the only feeling Rolf experienced was the shame of his association with the warmongers. As sweat trickled from under his wool collar down to his chest, Rolf gripped the goblet of liquid bubbles and gulped it down. He threw in a concentrated breath and slowly let it out, reflecting on the spectacle of Third Reich flags in a river of fluttering red along the streets. How interesting the chosen party colors matched the red of their victim's blood, his father's blood. Clouds had moved in and tinted the autumn's landscape a charcoal gray. As they rode along, Rolf watched Polish drivers pull off the road to allow the motorcade, with its high-flying Nazi flags, to pass. Studying their faces, he knew they would be glad if Hitler suddenly dissolved into smoke. In the distance, he noticed an old man with 2 children working in their half-charred field. They had no horses or oxen to assist them. He felt sad as they looked up when the motorcade passed and leaned atop the handles of their shovels, their expressions weary. How long would it take the citizens of the city to recover from the devastation surrounding them? Did anyone in power ever care about the consequences of war to real people? Farther along, he saw downed telephone poles, overturned bright red buses, dilapidated billboards advertising hair tonics, and dozens of craters where bombs had struck. Sickening waste. The jubilation and boasting of the two men sitting in the back double seats of the limousine was enough to make Rolf think twice about duty and respect. He thought, did they swill down the same brand of French champagne to celebrate my father's death? Their exhibition of white teeth was a travesty. Ever since the first day he met them in Berlin, Rolf had questioned the synthetic smiles and obnoxious grins of the horrible hellions, the 4 HHs as he nicknamed Hitler, Himmler, Heydrick and Hess. Germany has awakened. Britain and France had no idea what they were in for when they refused Germany's outstretched hand. Salute, Heydrich said with calculating eyes, lifted his glass toward Hitler and grinning coldly at Rolf. Such jealousy was justified, Rolf concluded. Without the customary 6 months of officer training, Rolf held rank he didn't earn. Hitler often bragged to others about Rolf's reputation and status as an Olympian champion, as if Rolf was Germany's darling, and although it embarrassed Rolf, it also kept him in good stead. The infantry troops patiently waited at the entrance to the city to begin the victory parade. On the avenue, hundreds of people waited along the curb to watch the parade of Nazi vehicles and to get a glimpse of Adolf Hitler. Interspersed along the route stood Wehrmacht soldiers with formidable beetle-like helmets, weapons steadied at their sides, and a sprinkling of Polish police. Alongside the slowly moving vehicles walked dozens of German officers in tailored military jackets and lofty peaked hats, their eyes cast straight ahead. Feeling sick at the charade he was playing, Rolf knew he couldn't go on acting the role of a devoted SS officer for long. With disdain, he glanced at his 2 rough companions. Little did they know that Rolf had decided to follow in his father's footsteps. Like his father, he understood the agony of the brush and the heart of the artist etched within every stroke of the lines and rounded edges. He, too, would smuggle artwork out beyond Hitler's control. Rena and Johnathan watched the parade approaching from their vantage point at 25 Schuska Avenue in front of the building of the former Ministry of Religious Beliefs and Public Enlightenment, recently renovated as an exclusive Nazi restaurant. The vehicles in front of the parade, gray trucks and tanks draped with swastikas, made Rena cringe. She only came along to talk sense into Johnathan. The strong, masculine appearance of the linked, armed, black uniformed soldiers both intimidated and impressed her. Both sides of the street were festooned with banners and flags. A few steps away, a clown held a large bouquet of colorful balloons. It gave her a sense of a merry holiday parade. As she watched all the jubilant faces of the children jumping up and down along the curb, she caught the excitement. Then she noticed Johnathan fidgeting in his pocket. Under a black wool coat, Rena wore white pedal pushers knee-high white socks, and a white button-up shirt with a pink collar and matching pink buttons. Johnathan told her that her long blonde hair, twisted up in a knot with a velvet ribbon, gave her a sophisticated, grown-up air. She buttoned her coat, all the while trying to figure out how to save Jonathan's life. "Don't do this, Johnathan," she whispered as the motorcade grew closer. "You're going to get killed. There are too many policemen." He bent down and whispered in her ear, "I was only joking about the grenade. Don't be so worried." "You were not joking." Johnathan glanced behind them. "Don't be dumb, blonde Nazi, Rena. Someone has to stand up to this bully. With Hitler eliminated, we can save Poland." "You are a nasty troll, Johnathan. What's wrong with you?" "Stop calling me that." The car slowed. Johnathan leaned back against the wall next to the window of the restaurant. "Do you know about the Nazi decree on forced labor for all Jews and Poles over 14? And Poles over 14? Rena caught the serious, forbidding expression in his eyes. "But you're over 14, Johnathan. You're 18, and they're not making you work." Watching each car in the motorcade, Johnathan whispered, "It's not public information, but in a couple of weeks it will be. I have my sources." "Maybe they're just trying to scare us so we won't cause any trouble." "Do you know the Reichsbahn has recently tripled their workers? Tell me why the German state railroad suddenly needed to hire on over 1 million extra people, Rena. They plan to move all the Jews from Vienna and Western Poland here," he said. "Think, Rena, why are they going to all the expense of moving thousands of Jews to Warsaw?" But you're just guessing at their plan, Johnathan. It would be better for us if we just lived in one place anyway. They are rounding us up like cattle to isolate us. This won't be the first time someone has locked up Jews. Just then, an old man dressed in white passed by selling ice cream. Rena had an idea. She ran up to him and ordered 2 chocolate cones. The man's young assistant dug and dug into the container, piling the ice cream high. After paying with a small gold coin, she forced Johnathan to take one and smiled. "You'll never finish that ice cream in time." "Bet me." Johnathan licked faster, a trace of rebellion in his expression. Rena thought the activity provided an excellent camouflage for a resistance volunteer about to embark on a dangerous task, as much as she agreed that someone should stop Hitler. Just now she wished she could stop Johnathan. "What if one of these little children along the road get hurt, Johnathan?" When he didn't respond, she said, "You're going to break Papa's heart." Johnathan turned and drilled these words into her eyes. "Write this on my gravestone, Rena. The only thing required for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing." He let out a long sigh, and Rena knew dying was foremost on his mind. Then he continued, keeping his voice low. "The wounds of Warsaw cry out for justice. Papa is too old to do anything. The army wouldn't even accept him. I am willing to stand up and be counted among those young men who died to fight evil before evil prevails." Rena went silent, the ice cream tasting sour on her tongue. With a delicate touch on his arm, she whined, "But you're just standing up to be shot down. What's the sense in that?" "You'll see how much better life will be once Poland is rid of Hitler and his anti-Semite cohort, Hans Frank." Things are going to get better anyway, Johnathan. They've done killing. It's over. You're just like all the other innocent citizens, Rena. It's not over. You'll be like them, Johnathan, a criminal. Stop talking to me, he said, throwing the unfinished ice cream in a pile of rubble nearby. The crowd thickened as the Nazi motorcade ambled on. Rena and Johnathan maneuvered back into their front row position. Still whispering, Johnathan said, "Once Hitler is gone, the world will be safe again." She saw his jaw clenched in determination. The cold ice cream dissolving in her stomach increased her trembling. Her teeth began to chatter. "But you won't be here to enjoy it. What will that do for you or our family?" He put his arm around her shoulder and whispered directly into her ear. "An honorable death can be better than a spineless life, Rena. When you know you are saving a lot of people, it's different." The motorcade advanced along at a slow, steady speed. Her stomach fluttered and her head throbbed. "Look, Johnathan, 3 black Mercedes limousines, not one. How will you know which one it is?" The supporters along the route hoisted Nazi flags and welcome banners, smiling and waving at Rolf. He felt mortified, acid gnawing his guts. Others shot out their arms in the Heil Hitler salute, ready to serve the new ruler. Some leaned back against buildings and trees with long faces and angry expressions. Polish policemen wearing swastikas lined the avenue. Rolf knew how Hitler cherished beautifully choreographed victory celebrations that drove home the message of Aryan superiority. The driver turned to reconfirm Hitler's desire to stop at the new restaurant exclusively for Germans at 25 Schuska Avenue. "The sooner the better. I'm famished," Hitler said, still smiling and waving at the crowd through the open window. Turning to Rolf, Hitler explained, "All Poles and Jews in government positions will soon be replaced by us, ethnic Germans from the Baltic states. Tough as steel. That Heinrich is a superb organizer. Of course, I do not take the credit for these achievements, all for myself. God leads me." Rolf nodded without making eye contact. "Yes, sir." "Our holy order was designed in heaven long before Frederick the Great, with harsh discipline, steel courage, and the sort of superior brains we've gathered." Hitler stopped waving and turned directly to squint at Rolf. "Brains like yours, Brandt. Germany will rule the entire world for at least 1,000 years. Rolf felt sick, but he still controlled his response. "Thank you, sir. I hope this all is over soon. I need to get back to my mother." "No need to worry." As was his habit, Hitler cut him off. "You are doing a fine job, a far better job than your father. You are a man of integrity, someone I can trust without reservation." Rolf anticipated the rise of flush on his cheeks. When he felt a current of hate burn his eyes, the artery in his neck pounded like a jackhammer. It took determination not to spit in Hitler's face. He thought, "You are the reason my father is dead. You are the reason this country is in shambles. If he had a gun right now, he would use it to stop the flow of more innocent blood." It was then Rolf realized it would take billions of dollars, millions of lives to stop Hitler, and maybe nobody ever could. The thought paralyzed him. Even if the world stopped Hitler, would more insane tyrants rise up again somewhere else in the world? Would anything less than the second coming of Christ truly change the nature of humankind? He thought, maybe if mothers are given equal power in ruling the world, perhaps then sons will no longer die. Sweat dripped down Rolf's forehead as his stare drilled into the eyes of the blood lover sitting across from him. Hitler pivoted back toward the crowd outside his window, waving again, his lock of hair bouncing against a wrinkled forehead. "Yes, keep cheering, you Polish fools." Tapping Rena on the shoulder, Johnathan whispered, "I know which one of the 3 limousines it is now. Look, Hitler is waving to the masses." She couldn't believe he truly intended to carry out his plan. "Mercy, just come home, Johnathan, please." "And right in this pocket, I have the solution." "That's outright suicide. The whole plan stinks." She licked the ice cream until it was almost even with the cone. You're right out where everyone can see you. You'll never get away." "Hush. Hush. Here we go." As the middle limousine drove closer, she noticed all the windows were open. Johnathan waited on his toes. A bolt of terror struck Rena in the heart. She wanted revenge, yes, but not at the expense of her brother's life. She had to stop him. In her mind, she saw Johnathan pulling the pin and running to the vehicle, throwing it inside the driver's window, and turning to escape while bullets blew him away. As Johnathan started out, Rena suddenly pushed in front of him, blocking his path. She ran toward the vehicle herself and smashed her ice cream all over the windshield. The police swarmed toward her immediately, but before they touched her, Johnathan grabbed her. He pulled her from the scene, apologizing and running away with her in tow, not obeying the commands to halt. Johnathan and Rena ran. They bolted past shops, businesses, and rows of destroyed buildings, hoping they could outrun the 2 policemen who pursued them. "Halt! Halt!" Johnathan yanked her and ducked her head under a destroyed doorway behind a half-charred row of bushes. The sirens roared by. The footsteps became weaker. Waiting a moment to calm their hearts, they heard footsteps over the clink of distant trains. Rena grabbed Jonathan's hand and held it tight. Heavy footsteps. They stared at each other. Should they run or stay silent? The footsteps passed their hiding place. They waited another minute. With breath held, they didn't move a muscle, their backs pressed hard and cold against the cement blocks of the damaged apartment building. On the run again, they hoped they had lost their pursuers. Johnathan led Rena to Mr. Kunzek's house, a safe house, he explained. At last they arrived atop the stairs that led to the home of the leader of the Polish underground. Johnathan snapped, "You idiot! You are a blonde Nazi. What do you mean by getting in the way?" Gasping for breath, she began to descend the stairs to the entryway, her knees still trembling. "You can't just go around killing people, Johnathan. We're not barbarians." On the 3rd step from the bottom, she tripped in a pile of leaves and fell to the bottom of the stairwell, bruising her right knee and scraping her elbow against the rough wall. Jonathan's voice instantly filled with concern. "You all right? Let me see your arm." "It hurts, Johnathan. Stings bad." After a brief examination, he said, "Will a kiss make it better?" "Don't laugh. It feels like it's bleeding." "Only a few drops. You'll be fine. It's nothing compared to..." Rena nodded and smiled at him for not completing his sentence. "You're right. It's nothing at all compared to that." Johnathan was definitely the nicest brother in the world, always doing his best to protect her. She liked him helping disadvantaged people, but hoped he would come to his senses about doing away with Hitler. Johnathan pounded on the door. "Mr. Justice, please, it's Johnathan." His wife answered the door and invited them in, offering them sweetened tea and maple sugar cookies. She listened as they told her what happened and then said, "I'm sorry to hear all this bad news, But my husband will be home soon. Johnathan fell silent. Watching him think, Rena felt her lungs pump with tension. The old Polish woman scolded her as she washed the blood off her knees and chocolate off the sleeve of her black wool coat. Lucky you, young lady. The Nazis didn't want to spoil their spectacular parade with the blood of a beautiful young woman. That's the only reason you're alive. The woman bore a striking resemblance to their nanny in Berlin, long black hair tied back with a bright blue ribbon, big black Oxfords, and a full apron stained with berry juice. Girls shouldn't. I beg your pardon, madame. Rena felt regret for disrespecting the poor old woman, but she didn't owe anyone an apology. Truly, I am not sorry. I would do it again to save my brother. As she looked up at Jonathan's face, she studied the dusting of freckles on his cheeks and imagined him burning in a Nazi bonfire and her mother wailing, insane with grief. She couldn't hold back the tears. We need you, Johnathan. Without Sarah, I need you worse now than ever. Johnathan stepped closer, standing tall and straight, a determined guardian. I love you, little sister, but we must put our personal feelings aside now. Now that certain things must be accomplished for the benefit of our country. He stroked her shoulder, and Rena felt her heart crumbling, her goal to talk some sense into him failing. Bita, don't cry, Rena. I will be safe, I promise. I'll be home in time for supper. Rena begged him to forget his plans to come home with her that moment. We have a country of our own, Johnathan. We Jews are only visitors anywhere we live. Why die for a country we will soon be leaving? Johnathan kissed Rena on the cheek. With tears in his eyes, he bid her farewell, while the old Polish woman wiped her cheeks and restrained her from following after him. Rena screamed, No! Come back! Come back, Johnathan! They saw your face!